When we look at health through this lens of some torturous diet, then of course we're going to delay it because we've got to wait for the perfect time when outside distractions don't feel like they're going to disrupt some level of strict plan, right? When we look at it through the lens of I'm going to start with those tiny habits that really set up some momentum in my morning and I just feel awesome in the day, why on earth would I wait longer than right now?
Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey friend, welcome back to another episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, of course, here with you every week. And it's December, which means it's a lot of time, I feel like, looking back over the year. And a theme I've been seeing, not just in our conversations, but in the questions that you send me and questions that my clients ask. A big thing this year was really about energy, and the flip side of that being burnout. We've talked about it quite a bit. Even last week, we talked about, stop sprinting the marathon in terms of our health and the way we approach it. And today we're going to continue that conversation, but from a slightly different angle. So today we're focusing on that connection between physical and mental energy and recovering from burnout so that we can foster stamina with our habits. So let me introduce you to our featured guest. He is the owner of Body Reset, a premium health coaching service focused on helping career-driven professionals and business owners elevate their energy, body, and minds. He and his team have coached thousands of clients with a world-class coaching and specialist team in a uniquely integrated and aligned way to fix your gut, rebuild your energy, and feel confident in your own skin over 40. So you see why we connected, why I'm so excited for this conversation. So please help me welcome Olly Wood.
Thanks so much, Jen. So good to be on.
How are you?
I'm really good, thanks. It's Saturday morning here, just kicking into things. So hopefully I'm fully focused, fully awake, and ready to go.
Yeah, I have a feeling that you will be just fine at that time. So it's been a couple months since we spoke. What's on tap for the holidays for you guys?
Yeah, well, for me, I'm actually going in for another shoulder surgery in about 2 weeks.
Wow.
Like a full shoulder open surgery. If you can see the video, I've got a motorbike helmet in my room here where about 2 years ago, I came off my motorbike on the track. So it was about 200 Ks. It's about 130 miles an hour. Full brake failure and basically hit the wall, went flying over the far end with just no brakes working, which is kind of just one of those mechanical nightmares you don't expect to happen. So it's my second surgery, my third surgery on that shoulder, second surgery from the crash, and just trying to reattach muscles that aren't working. So that's going to be a little bit of a different break for me. You know, we can certainly dive into how much that's changed my view of you certainly can't out-train a bad diet, and it's allowed me to really double down on that. But from a holiday standpoint, it's very much just a kind of a forced recovery.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I suppose that's good timing to do it at that time of year when,
My partner doesn't think so, but I'm still not sure.
Yeah. So I want to expand on your story, but really quick before we do that, let's tell our members what they're getting this week. So members, your recipe is for crunchy cruciferous slaw. Say that 10 times fast. It uses a bunch of fall veggies. You could also change it up use the same recipe with a different combination of cruciferous vegetables. And the dressing, by the way, it's a turmeric tahini dressing. Totally delicious. You could, use it on other things too. So this slaw could be a great side for your holiday table, or even, add some protein to it and make it an easy weeknight meal. And since it's December, it's the last month of the quarter, which means it's time for your live Q&A session. So it's going to be a one-on-one this quarter. You and I, 30 minutes, whatever you want to talk about. I have loved the conversations that we've had so far this month, and I can't wait to connect with the rest of you. So if the crunchy cruciferous slaw sounds good, or you want to hop on the phone, just you and me, I would be honored. And here's what you do. You're going to go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries. For $10 a month, you'll get weekly recipes, a monthly article or tool, extra discounts from me and our partners, plus access to live Q&A sessions. It's a total deal. When you take advantage of the full offerings like this month, you save far more than that $10 cost. I say it every time. It is a no-brainer way to show yourself that your health is a priority. Plus, becoming a member supports this podcast and this community so that we can continue to do this for you. We're at like almost 3.5 years and counting. So here's what you do. You're going to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries, or just click the link in the show notes because that's easier than remembering a URL. Once you're there, you click support now, type your email and payment method, click subscribe, and you're all set. You'll get this week's recipe for the crunchy cruciferous slaw and access to your quarterly live session, just you and me. Okay, Olly, other than the accident, right? Tell us your story. Like, how did you get into the health, wellness, fitness space? And then specifically also your specialty of working with high performers and burnout.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it was very much a progression. For me in high school, I was just the typical hyperactive kid doing every sport under the sun. It would be anything from polo to rugby to rock climbing to rowing. It was very much exercise before school started, kind of find a way to sleep or eat during school and then do it again afterwards. At the time, I had a real inclination towards commerce and business anyway. So as I went into uni, that was my focus. But I found myself back in a personal training space quite quickly. And for me, it was very much through my own personal endeavors of being competitive, being focused on a sport. I found that really, really important to just have that edge. And for whatever reason, decided to do a bodybuilding show right in the middle of uni. No money, no time, need to be focused on studies. And I decided that was a good idea somehow. So for me, that was kind of the background of just exploring every avenue of sport and understanding the nuances of everything, right? You jump on a horse and play polo and you're saying, well, the horse is doing all the work. And you're like, no, there's so much going on here. Rowing, it's not just about being fit. There's such a nuance around how you're going to place that oar into the water to make sure there's no extra drag. And all of those nuances that come through, you start to realize that through every sport, you've got to pay attention. And being able to dive into the exercise space rather than just lifting a dumbbell up and down, I already knew that there was going to be a whole lot of level of nuance around how we could really elevate that. So I hired my first coach at like 18. It was kind of like, do I eat this week or do I hire a coach? And setting up that in a way that I knew that I was going to work with the best in order to accelerate my learning curve, right? You either pay with time or money. And I was pretty willing to accelerate that pretty quickly. So even when I didn't have the money, I found the way to sort of invest in that space. And I think that's accelerated the last 10 years for me quite quickly. Is I just started with an absolute obsession with exercise, maximize every aspect of how you could move in the gym properly. After a couple of years and started to build a real name for myself in that personal training space, I was working with the business owners and entrepreneurs and these sort of high level business owners. I started to get an awareness that, okay, I could optimize every aspect of how they move in the gym and this programming over a 6 to 12 month period. But if I'm not addressing the level of stress and inflammation that they're walking through the door with, then I'm only working with 2% of the pie, So it was taking the time to just, one, take the time to invest in me to be the best at what I could do, but also be intellectually curious the whole way along to really ask, like, what am I missing here? Where can I actually improve? So that journey really over the last 5 to 6 years has very much been a development of that and continued to be, because we started to, we nailed the exercise piece. But as we found those sessions adjust over time, it was 100% exercise. And then it became, 80% exercise, 20% nutrition. It became 50% training, 50% lifestyle, developing over time to really discuss how could I help this person move forward. So as I dove more into that space, as you probably know, every personal trainer comes in with their new degree and I know how to train you. And as you learn more stuff, you start to open this up to, there's so much more I don't know, right? And trying to take the time to understand that I wanted to explore the psychological element and the nutritional element and then like this whole gut health piece and really understanding like what part, in what order do I need to place for a client journey to truly be relevant for their age and stage of life, right? You mentioned that many, we specialize in clients over 40. It's usually where they start to pay attention because what worked 20 years ago is not working the same way. It's just not responding. So I started to become hyper aware that this was a 10-year degree in every direction. So in that space, I was investing into coaches personally for me, and there's development there. I really felt like I could fast track that in a real world applicable aspect. And then I really tried to make sure that in order to develop the program in the right standpoint, I simply needed other people, both from a time standpoint and knowledge standpoint, in order to complete what I was after, right? So that's really what led us to naturally be online, is it simply couldn't be a service we can constrain within a gym, right? So we started to bring in the mindset coaches, we started to bring in the clinical nutritionists, we started to dive deep into their blood work, really understanding what's happening with this lifestyle design element, what's happening with their gut, and really just addressing it in the right order. And that's been an iterative process the whole way through, right? I'm not someone who had all the answers. It was just observational of how could we optimize that client journey. And yeah, like you said, after working with thousands of clients, we can now get an idea of in what order, what do they need to focus on, right? We're not diving straight into the new CrossFit workout. How are we taking the time to repair the tissue, get the body functioning well? So you're actually in a position that energy recovery and sleep quality is in a position that anything you do from an exercise standpoint actually makes a difference, right? And that's been very much the journey of just along the way, iterating how I thought about training and more importantly, rethinking and being able to challenge those beliefs that I thought were true that weren't, right? And they aren't serving you. And I think that's a big shift that it takes an ego hit along the way, but it's just, you've got to step back and be the sponge. Like, what am I missing?
Yeah, I love that so much because I think, not only do I resonate with that, I feel like I describe people as like an insatiable student. I describe myself in that way. Like, I can't stop learning. And when somebody says something, I'm like, right? Like, I don't know if that makes sense to me, but how could it be true? And what do I need to understand? But so in that context, right, and talking about high performers and people at an age where what worked for us before no longer works. And my client base is very similar because I always say too, if all you care about is the number on the scale, like, you don't need me. You can do anything out there. But I feel like before we get into the nitty gritty, like, I want to ask you a question because it's a little bit of an oxymoron sometimes that such high performers also end up in this burnout place because, like, I identify as a high performer, sometimes to a fault, right? And have ended up in burnout myself. But I also think those are the same kind of people who would understand as high performers, these are the things that allow us to do that, right? Like, we can intellectually understand that the likely end of certain behaviors is burnout. So I'm so curious to hear from you, like, what's the disconnect? Why is this particular population so prone to burnout?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good question. And I think there's an associated message with performance, right? And it's typically stress. Is understanding that when we push the body, we push our mind, we are doing these great things, there's a level of sacrifice, stress, and breaking the body down a little bit if we're not taking into the other piece, which is recovery, right? And I really love the message around resilience, right? And taking the time to look at it through the lens of how can we show up better. But if we're just focused on performance, and resilience is not really there. It's kind of like talking about productivity all day, but if you don't have the capacity to actually be productive because you're burnt out, you're tired, you're run down, you're not fueling the body well, then that's an area that I think needs to be addressed first. So if we look at performance in a typical athletic scene, in order for you to be high performing beyond a couple of years, right, not just in high school, but actually in your 20s and 30s, wanting to be in the Commonwealth or the Olympics or the world stage, there's going to be a real double down on recovery, right? What are those things you're doing in order to show up better tomorrow? Because you start to become very hyper aware that it's not about being the hardest worker in the room today. It's about making sure you can still show up tomorrow and put that extra step forward. And I think in the business space where there's not a confined set of rules, right? Here is your pitch, here is your goal line. It's very hard to know ultimately what is the outcome, right? Because it again is a marathon. Like you mentioned, we're not sprinting a marathon, but we're taking the time to look at how we're making sure that we are front loading our day in a way that we aren't falling apart in the process, right? We become so hyper aware, so reactive in the things that we need to do today that we get to the point that we are actually operating at 50%, right? And we see this time and time again is that let's get you in your week. If this is flat out, let's make sure there's a walk, there's a massage, there's something in your week they're actually looking forward to you where there's just a midweek de-stress. And I can't tell you how many times I've added a massage on a Wednesday or a Thursday type thing. I lie down, I realize I haven't actually stopped a week. And I'm so grateful for having that little bump in the day. And this comes back to the whole nutrition and food side of things is it's very rarely hunger that makes you binge at the end of the day or Friday or Saturday, right? It's you catching up on the week because there's no level of self-compassion for you through that week. And if you're not front loading that joy, that energy into your week, into your day, you're simply not taking yourself seriously. You're just going into it with a reactive mind. And it's just as bad as getting up in the morning and going straight to your emails on your phone. You're just not paying attention to you before you take in the outside world. So it's a whole recalibration of how you approach fitting you in and taking you as a serious part of you showing up as being high performing, because you can't just run on the third, fourth caffeine pill in order to get through that day. And if you are, you're simply grabbing that energy from tomorrow to bring it today. So eventually that catches up with you.
Yeah. So I love this idea too of what you were saying in terms of front loading your week and front loading your day and finding, I hate the word balance because I don't think balance really exists, right? But finding those pockets of time so that all things are getting sort of deposits, throughout the week. So help us understand too, because I know one of the big things is really connecting between our body energy and our mental energy, right? Walk us through that, because I feel like it's something most people are really overlooking.
Yeah. When you take the time to look at most high performers, you look at most corporate spaces, the natural tendency is to disconnect mind and body, right? It's just a head sitting on top of a meat suit and there's no connection between the two. And it's easier that way because, it's perceived to be easier that way because we start getting these signals of when we need to stop, when we need to slow down, when we're hungry, when we've been sitting on our bum for 10 hours, maybe we should move, right? And again, if we're looking at it through that reactive lens, then it simply becomes something that we try to disconnect from. When we start to realize that our health is our asset, not our liability, once we take the time to look at it properly, especially if you're in your 40s and 50s and you're trying to look at this through a long game, you're not just trying to get that first ladder run. I think there's a very different conversation to be had. So provided you're willing in order to go through a level of let's step back, assess, and make sure we approach this a little bit differently, it's kind of like, let's sharpen the axe before you start swinging. It's very similar from a productivity lens of, let's get you to do a time audit of every 30 minutes in your day. What are you doing? Most people will be like, I don't have the time to do it. And my response to that is, well, that's exactly why we need to do it, right? Because you're just floundering in all of the tasks that need to be done. You're likely blinded by the stuff that's urgent, that's not actually important, not moving the needle forward. And when you start to realize that, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are not, they don't have more hours in the day. They're simply more leveraged in what they do. It's simply being able to have that thinking time in their day in order to know what to focus on, right? So to just bring you back to that reality, if you want to create some comparison in a healthy way, I think it's really just allowing yourself to give you the space to do more. Because if you just look next to the person next to you who's flat out all the time, he's probably not making any money either, right? Like, how do you take the time to look at this through the lens of really constructing the life you want to live as a business owner, as a corporate exec, whatever that might be, in order to get the most out of your day, and you're making sure your health is along for the ride? Because if you ever get there, you want to make sure that your health is actually something you can enjoy, right? We've certainly worked with enough clients that have got to that level of wealth and they're like, wow, I actually forgot that the most important part of this I left behind. So when we look at this through the lens of gut and brain, it's really taking the time to look at this through both lenses. If we look at the gut and we're in tune with what we're eating, it's going to have a significant impact on our mood, our focus, our clarity through the day. But understanding that it's going to go the other way too, right? Our brain is going to impact our gut. Taking the time to look at how we think of certain foods, right? If I give you a smoothie and I say this is full of all the nutrients, it's going to make you feel amazing in the day, your body's going to digest that entirely different. If I gave you the exact same smoothie and said, like, this is the latest thing from McDonald's, it's got all the saturated fat and sugar and all this stuff in it, it's going to, make you feel sluggish. Like, your body actually triggers a different response. And when we start to look through this and how your body operates, both through stress and digestion, through the lens of how you think, it really allows you to assess and tune in. Because I can't tell you how many men I used to train in, specifically men, but corporate professionals in a training environment where as soon as I told them to tune into training, they're like, shit, I got to think here too. Like it was
right.
They try use training as a way to disconnect. And there's absolutely an area of, your circuit class or run or something there where it's really an endorphin hit and really much more for a mental health. But I think there's a level of, you've actually got to feel your body. And sometimes that's uncomfortable because it feels foreign. It feels like you haven't been paying attention for a while. And I think when you start to feel like that's on your side a little bit more, you're actually playing a whole different game.
Yeah. And I want to get into some of that, what we actually do. But I feel like I also have to ask this question first so that everybody, I think, is with us, right? Where is there a distinction between busy and burnout, right? And I think, I hate the word busy. I started to say, full lives, right? Like all of these things. But some people might be listening and going, yeah, but that's not me, right?
Yeah. I think the difference is active recovery versus passive disengagement. And if you're setting up your week where it's busy, it's full of life, you're enjoying it, and you feel like you can show up tomorrow again, the typical one is, you're bouncing out of bed. But I think that's less, it's not going to happen if your back's popping and cracking and you're feeling a little bit old in the morning. It's taking the time to look at how you approach the end of the day, right? Is it something that you are winding down, you're doing things for you that really fill your cup and setting you up for the following day? Is there a quick stretch? Is there are you breathing? Are you having a bath for yourself? Are you taking the time to just do something to wind down consciously? Or are you getting to the end of the day and it's like, I just need to disengage. I'm going to go watch TV for 2 hours, right? There's no actual recovery improvement from that. You're just disengaging yourself from life. And whether that's alcohol, whether that's food, whether that's TV, there's ways of just removing ourselves from the busyness of the day in order to cope for tomorrow. Now, that's not burnout, but it's definitely the road to it, right? So getting an idea of just assessing your night routine. What does that look like at the moment? Is it just, I can't think about anything, I'm just going to blob? Or am I actually actively doing something to look after me before the day starts tomorrow?
Yeah, it's so important, and the phrase that you use, right? The passive disengagement is, a big one, I think, for us all to remember. So let's do our ad for our partner for this episode, and then we'll get into, the nuts and bolts of how to make this happen. So our partner for this episode is DNA Miracles. Because every child is a miracle, DNA Miracles provides the highest quality body and wellness products designed for babies, children, and expectant mothers. All products are gentle, easy to use, and 100% effective when used as directed. DNA Miracles partner with leading health professionals and scientists who follow the highest standards in ingredient selection to create the most effective skin, hair, and health solutions. As natural as possible, DNA Miracles is the best and safest option on the market for you and your little miracle. From expert pediatricians to real family testimonials, everyone has fallen in love with DNA Miracles. So a big piece of kids' energy, or maybe balancing kids' energy, is a better way to put it, is about the nutrition and filling in the gaps, both where their nutrition falls short and where our food supply falls short. So DNA offers a drinkable multivitamin and a chewable. The DNA Miracles Isotonics Multivitamin Plus is the drinkable, formulated to support the needs of children needing particular nutritional support in the areas of digestive, neurological, and metabolic health. Plus, the DNA Miracles drinkable omega-3 is absolutely delicious. It tastes like a creamsicle. They're going to love it. You're probably going to want to have some too. So if you're ready to upgrade the health of any of the younger people in your life, you can get 10% off and free shipping when you try DNA Miracles. Simply text the word miracles, MIRACLES, plural, miracles, to 844-947-4846. You'll receive the link and coupon code right to your phone. Again, simply text the word miracles, MIRACLES, to 844-947-4846. You'll receive the link and coupon code directly to your phone. This is a toll-free number. Standard text and data rates may apply. Okay, Olly. So maybe we recognize that we're lacking energy. We're feeling sluggish. Maybe we've just said, okay, that's me with the TV at night. You also mentioned that in your experience, there's a better way to start than other ways to sort of recover and get everything back on track. So where do we begin?
Yeah, well, the big shift, and if we're going to simplify it right down into where people start, right, is we're already running on fumes. We feel low on energy, as you said, is a massive theme of this year. And we seem to be focusing on, okay, well, we need to get healthy. So we're going to force the body to change. We're going to start exercising. We're going to drop calories, whatever, right? And we're taking the time to look at it through the lens of simply forcing change. Now, the reason we got into that space is, as we mentioned before, there's a lack of self-compassion towards ourselves. There's a reactive way of missing the morning meals, kind of lightly eating through the day, or not really having sort of that nutrient base, right? There's no protein in breakfast. There's no sort of foundation of energy through that day. So we try to catch up in our last meal. That's usually where we need to start. So let's start with the structure of our day and actually setting up our morning in a way that's allowing us to win the day. And taking the time to look at that through the lens of three really simple things, right? Are we fueling our body in the right way? Is there some level of nutrients that's actually setting us up? And as we get older, muscle breakdown standpoint and energy focus and a hormonal background, we need to make sure that we're fueling the day, right? Getting away from the 16 to 18 hour fast, in my opinion, along as you start to get in your 40s and 50s, is probably not the most effective option. unless you're already in
Agreed.
great shape and your recovery's in a great spot and you see what works for you because you have the backing to know what works well. Once we start there, then taking the time to look at some version of challenge, it doesn't have to be in your morning, but it certainly has to be in your day, is, I actually moved from someone who was always exercising first in the morning, doing the full weight training. And now I simply go for a 10 to 15 minute walk in the morning and just really double down on getting some sun exposure, right? Before I sit down in front of a screen. And I'll do the workout later in the day. But whatever works for you, for your time frame, your personality, all of those things, just something to really move in the morning. And then just hydrate. Many of us are diving straight into our morning coffee. And it naturally dehydrates us right away. It probably makes us eat less food, and all of the systemic impacts of allowing artificial energy to run our day rather than actually allow us to boost it up naturally.
Yes.
So starting with just 500 mils of water, taking the time to really, I don't even know what that is in ounces, but taking the time to get a good 3 or 4 cups of water in before starting your day. I think those are a very simple 3 things there. You've probably heard them before, and this is why I'm more doubling down on the mindset behind the being proactive with how you front load your day rather than necessarily the skills, because we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. It's not new stuff, and we need to nail the basics before we do anything fancy. And we can dive into that, but we have to start with those. If you're not willing to make those changes, you're stuck in a reactive space and nothing will work.
Preach. Yes. Right. So, thinking about how we start our day, setting it up with, the water, the sunlight, a little bit of movement. What works for us, I think, as you pointed out, is also a big piece of this. And then you talked about nutrition to fuel the day, right? And set us up for sustained energy. So as you said, right, we need to be reminded more than taught. So remind us here, how do you recommend somebody formulate their nutrition to start the day?
Yeah, I'm going to look at it through the lens of someone who's in their mid-40s and 50s. They have probably got an extra 5 or 10 pounds around their waist that they're not happy with. They're feeling sluggish, run down, and they're always getting that afternoon dip. Where I typically start with that type of individual would be more of a protein and fats type breakfast, keeping your carbs under 10 to 15 grams, right? Taking the time to look at it through the lens of let's get you a little bit more metabolically flexible. 95% of the population is metabolically inflexible, meaning they can only ever really use carbs as fuel. They're dipping and diving all day, reaching into the pantry to try fill that energy gap. So if we can take the time to create a little bit of discipline around our morning routine, getting rid of the carbohydrates in that first meal and having the opportunity to program our body to function better through the day, I think is a really, really good place to start for most people.
Yeah, love it. And then you mentioned too that you sort of shifted your time of, your typical workout to be later in the day. And so often we're like, well, this is when I had it blocked in my calendar. So whether I am recovered or not, this is when it's happening, right? How do we even understand when we're recovered, when we're ready for the next thing, or if maybe we're better served like you are doing that more intense workout later in the day?
Yeah, it's a really great conversation. I had a very in-depth discussion with one of my coaches about this yesterday, is taking the time to look at it really from what lens you're coming through. Are we talking to someone at level 1, level 2 who needs to start moving? Or are we talking at someone who's actually burning the candle out at both ends, training 6-7 times a week, maybe double days, and needs to find a brake pedal, right? So I think the first lens is move, right? Take the time to just get those gait patterns moving, get a walk happening, move outside, take the time to even bring in some just rotations or stretches or joints getting through range, right? Just allowing that body to work through the compounding of both the food selection and maybe lack of exercise. There's a lack of flexibility, strength, and just integrity of joints that I don't think it's okay for you to go throw yourself under a squat bar. Like, things are going to break. So I think that level of just general movement and tuning in and starting with just the grounding walking space, especially with this high performance audience, is a really, really frustrating first step because they want to run the marathon from day one. And I think it really ties into why we struggle with health truly long term, is we are not willing to be bad before we can be good, right? We need to explore the things that we aren't doing in order to get better. So that would be kind of the starting point, is like, how can we move? How can we make sure that there's a daily routine of doing a 15-minute walk every day? Because even that is going to bring up so many things about how you exercise. Hey, it felt boring today because I'm doing the same loop. I'm like, great. Are you listening to a podcast? Are you doing something else? Are you focusing on the workout having to be exciting, or how you feel in the day? Right? All things that allow us to retrain how we can really set up our day for success. From there, and if we dive into a training standpoint, I really implore or recommend that we dive into some level of weight training and contraction, whether that be from home or gym, doesn't really matter. It's taking the time to tune into your ability to contract muscles more effectively. And, to really, really simplify it, you're doing your weight training for your body composition, you're doing your cardio for your mental health. And I think having a balance between the two is really helpful. If it's, the balance of those is very much going to be an art, not a science. It's going to be you tuning in with you, listening to what you really need on that day. If you're stressed out, you've been sitting on your bum all day, I think it's better to just go for a run, a bike, a spin class, a swim, like whatever fills your cup, that should be your goal. If that's not the space and you feel that you're at least in a moderate level of stress for the day, then let's look at contracting some muscles, right? And we're building the skill of contracting muscles because it is absolutely a skill. And very few people look at this as something more than minus lifting a dumbbell up and down. It can be a very mindful activity. And when you do it effectively, you can get more done in 20 minutes than most people do in an hour and a half, right? So it's not just allowing you to look at it through a time lens, but you are actually looking at this as nearly a meditative type practice to tune in with you and get the most out of the day.
I love it. And that's also even using your activity as part of the recovery in terms of, right? And I want to go back to even what you were talking about in the beginning of the episode too, and finding time in your week for the massage midweek. Or what are some of your other tips and tricks in that?
There's no tricks. It's really just that we block out our work meetings in our calendar and there's nothing for us, right? When was the last time you had a date night? Oh, I don't know, because I didn't block it in my calendar. When was the last time you actually had lunch on time or you went for a walk in the afternoon? Is it on your calendar, right? I think taking the time to bring it back to simple productivity basics of make it one calendar, home, work, and life in one space. So you actually block you in and taking the time to mark you in as red and it's not moving unless someone's going to hospital. It allows it to be less flexible because I think what's happening is we tend to just value ourselves more than others. And we see it in a personal training space all the time is we go to the gym if we have someone there that we're paying. And as soon as we're not, we just don't go. And I saw this for years as I worked with clients for 2-3 years at a time and we really built a great relationship. We built a momentum with training. And as soon as I wasn't there, they just stopped going. They hadn't actually built the muscle of building a routine for themselves and valuing their own word to go. And I think that's a huge skill that's misinterpreted because it's more about the effort and it needs to be a massive workout and I need to be paying for this big program. And it's more about, well, let's have a strategy, let's have a structure. So I know I'm being confident about what I start with, but I need to actually build this internal skill of showing up for me. And that's why that nutrition, that lifestyle piece of just your morning highlights so much I need to know about you, about how I'm going to optimize some level of health strategy for you moving forward, because it's certainly not going to start with a fancy new gym workout.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so interesting, like you said, like our tendency is to approach it from the opposite way.
Yeah.
Right? Like you said, to start with that, fancy workout. So I could also hear somebody saying, all this sounds great. Mm-hmm. And it's the middle of December and there are holidays and vacations and all the things. So great, not now, right? I know you've also said a bad week is the best time to start. What do you mean by that?
Two things. One, what we've just dived into, which is taking the time to front load your day so that you can show up better for you. If you're in the middle of chaos right now, the best thing you can do is recollect yourself in order to make the most of the week, right? We run around doing all the things we don't need to do because they look urgent, but they're not actually important. If we simplify that day, we look at it through the lens of productivity, we can refine what we actually focus on. But I think the bigger issue here is that we focus so much on what we have to do rather than what we want to do, right? It's not something you have to do. It's something that hopefully you'd like to do. And if you don't, it's totally fine. Live your life and do what you'd like to do. Once you're ready or you feel like that's something that actually aligns with the values that you want to follow through on, then it should be something you're looking forward to doing, all right? I had a conversation with someone Friday and I said, look, we can get started on the 15th. That's our next kickoff, or you can start in January. I'm like, I'm absolutely happy to start on the 15th. Like, why would I wait? I was like, absolutely. Like, that's the conversation I want to be having, because when we look at health through this lens of some torturous diet, then of course we're going to delay it because we've got to wait for the perfect time when outside distractions don't feel like they're going to disrupt some level of strict plan, right? When we look at it through the lens of I'm going to start with those tiny habits that really set up some momentum in my morning and I just feel awesome in the day, why on earth would I wait longer than right now, right? So I think it's very much why are you delaying? And ask yourself, why are you delaying? Because it's likely an underlying preconceived notion of why why you're delaying, why it would be stressful, why it would be horrible. And there's absolutely a breaking of beliefs, and there's change that's all scary and horrible, all these things. But when we do it through the lens of just truly aligning with what you actually want out of your body, which is to feel awesome, have better energy, have better focus, be more present in your day, less reactive, all of those things, that should be a today, kind of goal. Not like I'll just suffer for 3 months. We can talk about it then, right? I think that's just a difference in discussion or how we approach it, and kind of go from there.
I love it. All right. I think it's time for rapid fire off-topic questions. You
Yep.
ready?
Go for it.
All right. What's the best thing you've done for your health this week? What's the naughtiest thing you've done related to your health this week?
The best thing I've done for my health this week is get on the mountain bike with my dog and go up the hill. And I think it's just an awesome way to get all of that the joy bucket, the energy bucket filled for me. The worst thing I've done for my health this week is Thursday for me. I've just started with a brand new coach. First call was at 6:30 in the morning. I worked right through to about 8. I don't think I moved. So it was just an incredibly productive day. But again, I was definitely borrowing the energy from Friday, and it showed.
Yeah. All right. If you weren't the founder of Body Reset, what would you do?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think there's really I've been in this space a long time. We've got quite an active team and management. So would it be instead of, or if I was to have to leave my work now?
Whatever you want.
Okay. I know it's rapid fire, but I have to clarify. I think in the business consulting space, I think there's a real lens through program design and client fulfillment that I've kind of obsessed about for the last 10 years. So I think that would be an area that I'd be inserted in someone else's company.
Nice. Favorite book on any topic other than your area of expertise? Or you can give us a fiction book if you want.
I haven't read it for a little while, but I'm going to say Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss.
I love that book. All right. If you could cure one ailment, disease, or sickness, what would it be?
Can I go as broad as chronic inflammation?
Yeah, all of them is the answer.
All of them.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny we didn't dive into right today, but
Exactly.
As a world, we are getting so good at fixing acute issues that we have an immense chronic inflammatory issue, and it's showing through in every area. So if I can just go broad topic, I'd start there.
Right. If you were a superhero, what would be your superpower?
I hate this question. Focus. I think it's very much just blocking out the noise. Yeah.
That's
really boring.
No, that's a good one. Nobody said that. What's your biggest pet peeve?
People chewing loudly.
I get it so much. All right. Finally, in your opinion, what's the next frontier in wellness?
I think it's stripping back all of the stuff that we know is noise, we know is a quick fix, and actually tuning into real change. I hope that that's a place we're seeing meditation being a conversation that's being had. We're seeing people, actually lean into a 12-month program rather than another 6-week quick fix. I'm hoping, for the sake of humanity in general and understanding how chronic inflammatory issues are going, that we start to lean into, I'm actually looking at this as a personal development opportunity, not just a diet.
Yes, I hope so too. Well, thank you again for being here. Tell everybody where to connect with you, how to keep up with your work, all the things.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to learn more about us, I think bodyreset.online would be a great place to start. If you're someone who's looking for more actionable steps to actually apply to your day and break this down into real world habits for you to look at, I think bodyreset.online would be a great place to start. There's a 5-day challenge, both male and female, that will actually walk you through that whole sequence over 5 days to just really apply some of the basics in a nutrition, training, lifestyle setting and actually how that applies to you. So that'd be a great place to start. If you've just loved what we've talked about and you want to see more about me and kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis, Olly Wood NZ would be the best on Instagram. I think we put most of our stuff up there.
Yeah, and we'll put everything in the show notes for everybody too. So thank you again. Do you have another minute to hang out for our nutrition nugget?
Absolutely.
Excellent. So this week we're talking about cabbage. Okay, I know. This is like the least sexy of potentially any food that we have ever talked about in a nutrition nugget, but it's seasonal and I think it's often overlooked. So we're going to give it a little love, right? So cabbage is a cruciferous vegetable, right? Which is in the same family as broccoli, cauliflower, kale, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, all those. And you know the phrase like head of cabbage? So that's because, yes, its shape is like a head, but also its name, like the naming origin, the word cabbage comes from the French word cabache or cabache. I'm probably saying it wrong, but it means head. Long story short, I don't speak French. So it's thought also that like the ancient ancestor of cabbage was used in the Mediterranean for medicinal properties. So they used broth made with cabbage to treat cancers, diarrhea, ulcers, gout, even headaches. So let's look into why cabbage might have these healing properties. So first, it's generally high in water content, which means that it's hydrating. And as a side note, this also means don't store it in the freezer. Nutritionally, 1 cup of cabbage gives us 22 calories, 1.14 grams of protein, 2.2 grams of fiber, about 35.5 milligrams of calcium, and 150 milligrams of potassium. So cooking the cabbage, can actually add a few calories and remove a bit of the nutrients. But there's also some benefits to cooking the cabbage in terms of digestive comfort, right? So we'll get into that in a second. Cabbage is also typically a good source of vitamin C, K1, B6, potassium, manganese. Just like other cruciferous vegetables, cabbage, especially red cabbage, offers a variety of phytochemicals like anthocyanins, flavonoids, ascorbic acid, carotene, tocopherols, and other antioxidants. So in particular, though, cabbage contains choline. And we've talked about this before, but it's not actually seen in a lot of plants. So that makes choline pretty interesting. It's one of our essential nutrients, which means the body can't make it. We have to take it or eat it. And choline is important for cellular health, our metabolism, memory, mood, brain function, and muscle control. So what do we get, right? With all of these nutrients, where does this get us? So there's research supporting cabbage having anti-cancer activity. So with a compound called indole-3 carbinol, or I3C, it stimulates the detoxifying enzymes in the liver and the digestive tract. So cabbage is often recommended to cancer patients because lab studies saw that it could potentially slow the growth of cancer cells. And a 2021 study, it was Polish-born migrant women in the US, showed those that had higher cabbage consumption during their adolescence and adulthood had significantly lower risk of breast cancer. So interesting piece of this is that the cabbage was raw, lightly cooked, or fermented. So there may be something to the cabbage compounds that were not destroyed through longer cooking times. There's also research supporting a connection between cabbage and liver health, right? We have those detoxifying enzymes. And again, we even heard like the ancient use of cabbage was in that detoxification. And this is also potentially because of the antioxidants. So cabbage may even help counter diseases of the liver, like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and may reduce oxidative stress, widen arteries, and trigger antioxidant pathways, as it did in rats with type 2 diabetes in one study. So there are also other studies, which, like I said, it's rats. They're animals, but it's promising, right? Worth looking into more, I think. Cabbage also supports gut health, right? We know fiber, right? Supporting gut health. Cabbage has both soluble and insoluble fiber. So soluble fiber helps remove LDL cholesterol particles from the body. That's the cholesterol we don't want. Insoluble fiber helps us remove waste from the body. Again, more support for the liver and detoxification. The fiber also supports regular elimination. And we often say, fiber is your prebiotic. Then if you have kimchi or fermented cabbage, you also get your probiotic with cabbage. So it can be very multifunctional here. In addition, with the fiber and the other nutrients, cabbage can support blood sugar regulation. So studies suggest that those with type 2 diabetes may see a benefit from the bioactive compounds in cabbage, supporting normal glucose regulation, reduce damage to the kidneys and the liver, which are often impacted by diabetes. It's possible that cabbage also addresses some of the underlying factors of the root cause of type 2 diabetes, like oxidative stress, obesity, insulin resistance, that kind of stuff. There's also research supporting anti-inflammatory properties of cabbage. And so with, that we see heart health support. It's likely tied to, again, these antioxidant properties and the anti-inflammatory piece. You'll see research showing support for reduced stress on the heart with cabbage, potentially preventing mitochondrial dysfunction. And Maybe you've heard someone say to like wrap cabbage leaves around an injury. So that's not necessarily an old wives' tale. There are studies that show this, and we see it in practice. I also remember using cabbage leaves recommendations for people who are breastfeeding or trying to prevent some of the engorgement. So I guess it seems like, we might want to have some cabbage. So let's talk about their 4 main types. And then each type has some subtypes, but let's just go through the main ones. So first, green cabbage. This one is certainly the most common. It looks like a head. The leaves are tightly packed. They're typically like a pale green. I've also heard this one, the flavor of this described as mustardy. I don't know that I would describe it that way, but if you've ever had coleslaw, right, it's likely mostly made out of green cabbage. When you cook it, the flavor definitely gets milder. Some even say sweeter. Then red cabbage is our next variety, which is a dark reddish, almost purple color, and it has white veins. So, if you've ever bought pre-made like salad mix in a bag, right? The purple cabbage is what gives it that sprinkle of color in that mix of lettuce. It is a little bitter, I think kind of peppery in its flavor. Red cabbage is also slightly more nutrient dense than others, and that's suggested too by its color, right? We know the dark color is a sign of those phytochemicals and antioxidants. Fair warning, red cabbage will change the color of what it's cooked in. So if that's water or other foods, the color is going to bleed. Savoy cabbage has a darker green color than your regular green cabbage. The leaves aren't as tight as the regular green cabbage, and then they're also sort of like curly at the edge or like crinkly, but they're still crispy. And Savoy cabbage tends to be a little milder in flavor and a little sweeter. And then finally, Chinese cabbage. So this one's more of like an oval shape and has a thicker stem. And then I think with this one, you definitely want to cook it. Like not many people eat this raw. It's a pretty mild flavor. Napa cabbage is actually a type of Chinese cabbage. So no matter which variety, look for ones that are solid, strong leaves, right? We don't want any yellowing or browning. We don't want soft spots. We want to make sure it's not drying out either. You'll want to store your cabbage in a cool place to keep it fresh and retain that vitamin C. It'll keep for up to 2 weeks if you place the whole head of cabbage, like unwashed, in a produce bag. Like I said before, don't freeze it. And then before you're ready to use it, remove the outer leaves, like anything that's wilted or discolored. And then do what you're going to do with it. We'll talk about some cooking options. If you don't use it all, that's okay. Once you cut it, it's probably best to use it, though, within a couple days. So to eat it, right, people will do cabbage raw, cooked, or fermented. So the raw cabbage, right, we have slaw, salads. You could add it to stews for a little texture or tacos or in a wrap. Oh, your member recipe, right? That cruciferous, crunchy slaw that I can't say. That one uses a lot of the red cabbage. And then fermenting it, right? That becomes kimchi or sauerkraut. That's great for digestive health and immune health, right? Giving you that prebiotic when it's raw and a probiotic when it's fermented. If you want to cook it, you could boil it, steam it, bake it, roast it, grill it, stir fry it. There's a million things that you could do. And the flavor does get pretty mild when you cook it. So be sure to add seasoning or sauce or something. It's going to take on the flavor of whatever you put it in, I think. And you can find tons of recipes online. Just remember, we don't want to cook it to smithereens, right? Many of the health benefits come from the nutrients, which can be damaged or lost with lots of cooking. So I have to address the smell of cooking cabbage because this tends to be a complaint, right? This is actually from a compound called sulforaphane. So cabbage contains a precursor to sulforaphane. And you can reduce the smell if you add a little bit of acid when the cabbage is cooking. So add a little vinegar or lemon juice when it's cooking, and that can help. Also, not overcooking it can help with the smell too. And then the other smell people talk about with cabbage is gas. I'm going to say it, right? So here's what's really interesting about it. There's a compound in cabbage called, I am going to say raffinose. I don't know if that's really how you say it. It's also what's in beans and asparagus. So it's a type of carbohydrate that can trigger gas and bloating and GI upset because humans don't have the enzyme that's needed to break it down. So the raffinose sits in the lower intestine where it ferments thanks to other bacteria which do have the enzyme. And it's that bacteria that produces the carbon dioxide, the methane, or the hydrogen that causes the flatulence. So a little bit of a fun fact there. And remember, right, it's like that prebiotic, that fiber. So finally, you may hear people talk about cabbage containing anti-nutrients. So yes, cabbage contains goitrogens, which are naturally occurring compounds that can interfere with the uptake of iodine in some people. In reality, though, dietary goitrogens are not really a cause for concern because people are typically getting enough iodine and selenium, and cooking destroys those compounds. So not to mention for, dietary goitrogens to really trigger like a hypothyroid condition, you'd have to probably eat almost entirely only raw cabbage and cruciferous vegetables. I think that's pretty impractical and unlikely. So probably the average person doesn't need to worry. If you already have a thyroid condition like hypothyroidism, just cook your cabbage, and then it's not an issue. So there you have it, my friends. Cabbage is not sexy, but it might be something we want to add to our repertoire. So, Olly, any questions or anything to add?
No, not at all. That's an interesting piece, a very in-depth piece. I was going to say the choline's super helpful for your vegetarians as well. So,
yeah, exactly. Well, thank you again for being here. Just appreciate your time and energy.
No problem at all. Love you to be on.
Excellent. As always, everybody, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram or all social media. I'm at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. Website is A Salad with a Side of Fries. So social media or website, send us a message. I want to hear your takeaways, your questions, any ideas you have for future episodes. This is also the easiest way to learn more about working with me as your health coach. Of course, if you are not already a member, I invite you to join our membership by going to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries, or click the link in the show notes. This supports this podcast, this community, but most importantly, it supports your health. You'll get this week's recipe for the crunchy cruciferous slaw and access to your quarterly live Q&A session, just you and me. So until next week, remember that we can go, go, go. We can push till we crash, or we can foster the habits so that energy and stamina are a given every day. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.